In the late 4th century BCE, the Indian subcontinent was a powder keg. Alexander the Great had just marched his armies to the edges of the Indus River, disrupting every regional power structure in his path, only to abruptly turn around and retreat. He left behind a massive political vacuum in the northwest. Meanwhile, the eastern heartland was dominated by the Nanda dynasty. Ruling from the region of Magadha, the Nanda sat on staggering wealth and a hyper-militarized force of hundreds of thousands of infantry and war elephants. But they were deeply unpopular, ruling their subjects with heavy taxation and absolute tyranny. Into this volatile mix steps Chandragupta Maurya. He would go on to build the first pan-Indian empire, yet, historically speaking, he enters the timeline as a ghost. There is no historical consensus on who he was or where he came from before his rise. Ancient texts give us contradictory stories. Depending on which source you read, Chandragupta was either a humble commoner raised by a tribe of peacock tamers, the illegitimate son of the Nanda king himself, or a displaced Kshatriya prince hiding in plain sight. His path toward power solidified when he met Chanakya, also known as Kautilya. He was a brilliant, highly educated Brahmin strategist who had suffered a brutal public humiliation at the Nanda court, dragged by his hair out of a royal ceremony. Seething with rage, Chanakya vowed to leave his hair untied until the entire Nanda dynasty was completely eradicated. He needed an instrument to exact his revenge, and in the young, ambitious Chandragupta, he found a potential king. This unlikely alliance between a mastermind spymaster and a boy with no verifiable past set the stage for what became a sophisticated, long-term political heist. While Chandragupta would eventually command massive armies, his initial path to power relied on something much quieter than a direct invasion. He and Chanakya worked to hollow out the Nanda's control through internal pressure. Their strategy survives today in the Arthashastra, a manual of statecraft written by Chanakya. It outlines a pragmatic approach to power, emphasizing beta, the sowing of dissension, and danda, the precise use of coercion. They flooded the Nanda capital with an army of undercover operatives. According to the texts, their spies infiltrated the highest levels of society, operating under the guise of traveling merchants, ascetic monks, and poisoners. These agents initiated a cascade of psychological sabotage. They spread targeted rumors, manipulated court factions against one another, and arranged deniable assassinations. By the time Chandragupta's forces actually moved on the capital around 321 BCE, the Nanda leadership was already paralyzed by engineered paranoia. This victory proved that even the most heavily militarized dynasties could be dismantled by systematically eroding the trust between a ruler and their court. Once seated on the throne, Chandragupta moved to stabilize his borders with overwhelming force. He assembled a staggering standing army, reported by Greek observers to include 600,000 infantrymen and 9,000 war elephants. He aggressively expanded northwest into the territories left behind by Alexander, defeating the Greek general Seleucus I. This massive expansion was funded by a robust, standardized economic base and a tightly regulated taxation system. Despite these military successes on the frontier, Chandragupta's true grip on his citizens remained in the shadows. The real muscle of the Mauryan Empire was its hyper-centralized administration and an internal spy network. He institutionalized espionage on a continental scale. Secret informants maintained constant surveillance on foreign enemies, the local citizenry, and, most crucially, Chandragupta's own top ministers. He successfully took a continent of fractured, warring regional kingdoms and stitched them together. But that stability meant living in a unified and highly efficient total surveillance state. Look at this monument. This is the Lion Capital, built a few generations later as a symbol of the sweeping Mauryan authority Chandragupta founded. After 25 years on the throne, he had secured a territory stretching from the Himalayas to the Bay of Bengal. Then, in 297 BCE, while he was still under the age of 50, he walked away from it all. Jain traditions claim a 12-year famine was prophesied. In response, Chandragupta abdicated the throne, handing the crown to his son, and joined the monk Bhadrabahu, migrating south into remote territory. In this landscape, the emperor who once commanded 600,000 soldiers lived his final days as an ascetic, fasting to death on a quiet, rocky hilltop. Historians continue to debate this departure. Was it a genuine spiritual transition, a forced political exit, or a myth invented centuries later by monks eager to claim a great emperor as their own? The first phantom built a bureaucratic machine and an intelligence network that unified an entire subcontinent. Yet, in the end, he chose to willingly erase himself, leaving behind a monumental empire, but taking his true identity to the grave.